we're gonna have a great chat today with Ashley Lemieux. And I was just doing a deep dive into her page, and I just reposted one of her videos because I got a real kick out of. They're like a month apart, I think. So a lot of similar experiences, I feel like, that we are both currently having. Hi!
Hi! Yay! It worked.
I was just laughing so hard by myself because I was watching a video of you giving your daughter, I think your daughter and my daughter are a month apart, and I just started solids also, and your daughter's facial reactions and expressions to all of the food. I was like, this is exactly what I'm faced with every single day. I'm like,
It's so good. You're like, do you love this or do you absolutely hate this? I
yeah.
don't know whether to keep feeding it to you or not, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I know. Someone once told me that they're like, don't think that that they hate the food that you're giving them based off their facial expression because they're getting used to the texture. I'm like, are you sure?
Are
Because
you sure? Have you? Well, she does that with water too. So the first time we gave her water, it was the same reaction. And I was like, wow, this is going to be like a very dramatic introducing foods experience for all of us.
I know it's such a fun experience and also like such a bizarre one of like every day something new, and then like, do they like it? Do they not like it? Can you tell if they're going to be a picky eater or not? Like it's a it's a whole thing. But
Who knew?
yeah, it
I
is.
didn't know.
It's crazy. But I was also doing like a whole deep dive on your page, which I feel like I didn't even get like a full download of everything. But you've had like such a wild parenting journey of like on so many levels. I mean, I've been following you for a while, but like your parenting journey starts much longer ago than your little one right now.
Yeah, it is. It's been a really long process of loving the children that have come into our lives and losing them and healing and going back and forth on, do we open ourselves up again to potentially experience more loss, or are we okay with where we're at? Can we keep moving forward in our lives without more children? Like, we've really sat in this space of healing and also pain for a long time that started when we became permanent guardians of two kiddos. Man, that was about 10 years ago now. And then we lost them overnight uh, after raising them for half of their lives. And that part of our life still brings so much pain, because life right now isn't what we thought it was going to be when we all envisioned our future together. And then we waited a couple of years to try to have biological children for the first time. And we got pregnant, and the week that the pandemic, and this is a trigger warning for anyone listening who's experienced pregnancy loss, just so you know if you're not in the mental space to hear this right now. But the week that everything shut down in the pandemic, I was 16 weeks pregnant with our baby boy, and I went septic. Like, literally, I was fine, and then I wasn't, and I was rushed to the hospital, and it was the day that the hospital shut down for visitors, so they only took me in, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And at first, our baby was totally good, and then he wasn't, because my body could not support keeping me alive and keeping him alive, and I ended up delivering him alone in the hospital. And that was like the pit of despair for us after that. And then it took us another year and a half. For whatever reason, we're like, why aren't we getting pregnant again? And
Right.
looking back, it's my body needed to heal from going septic. And then when we got pregnant now with our baby girl who's here, Annie Ray, I got the same infection that I had when we lost our baby boy. So now I was a high risk pregnancy. I was on daily antibiotics. But luckily, because of the past experience with him, we learned that that's just how my body reacts when I'm pregnant. So now we could create a path moving forward that was safe for me and Annie Ray to get here. But yeah, I guess that's like the short version of how we are here now, finally with our baby girl. So for anyone listening, like I fully understand what it's like to lose children and to walk down the hard road of waiting for so long, wondering if they're ever going to get here, and what do you do in the meantime, and how do you like keep living, because sometimes it really feels like it is going to bury you alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so incredible that you're even open about sharing all of that because it is so challenging and devastating. And then, of course, to see where you are today and this beautiful part of your life that's so joy-filled is such a beautiful journey and a beautiful way to be talking about it now. But if we go back, because I love when we are on BDA Baby and talking about parenthood and people's journeys in parenthood, and also all the different ways that people can become parents. So if that's via surrogate, if that's just naturally, if that's via adoption, there are so many different routes people can go through to become parents or become guardians. How did that start for you guys? Like, what sparked that route of parenting from the beginning to become guardians and go into adoption?
It's actually really random. And at that time, because we had only been married for a couple of years, I was like 20, I think I was 25. And this was like a decade ago when all this started. So the details get a little bit fuzzy, but I was in the process of building my company. My husband was working, and kids weren't on our radar at all. But through a family friend, we learned of these two kids who needed a safe place to call home. And it's interesting because I'm trying to express how to put this in words. We just knew that we were supposed to do that, right? Like if someone told me right now at this point in my life, I know that it's not time for that to happen, at least right now again. But for whatever reason, at that time, it was the right decision for us to become parents to these two kids literally overnight. And it wasn't through the foster care system. We weren't foster care parents. We were given permanent guardianship of these two, and all of a sudden we went from just being these young, in our young 20s to having a 4 and a 6-year-old. And I remember texting my friend and I was like, what do I feed them? Like, what do these little humans eat? Because they're like functioning little humans at that age. And I'm like, I literally don't know how to take care of two little people. But we figured it out, and man, we were a family in every sense of the word. And I feel like when you have the privilege of stepping into motherhood in that way, the amount of love that comes along with that is something that I had never experienced up to that point in my life, and it changed me for the rest of my life.
That's such a beautiful thing. I think it's such an awesome and incredible choice that you guys made, and then of course to have that happen in your life and experience that love is amazing. And then of course also to have the sounds like tumultuous journey that it turned out to be, but again, or I should say, and again, coming to where you are now in this form of motherhood. I mean, what has been like the biggest surprise in this journey? I mean, it's been definitely had its ups and downs to get to where you are today, and you have your beautiful little girl. But what has it been like for you, like just being a mom and for again being a mom, but having your little girl?
I think that something that's been the most surprising throughout my whole journey of motherhood is that we don't give ourselves enough credit. Like I have learned that me as a mom, like the mom form of me, is so much stronger than I ever have given myself credit for. And it's amazing what the love of a mother can do. Like sometimes I look back and I'm like, how did I go through that? Like how how am I still here? And then because of the pain of the past, sometimes I fear the future. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what if this or that? Or it causes this anxiety, right? Because once you lose something that you really love, you know what that's like. And so
Mm-hmm.
I fear it happening in whatever way in the future. But I always go back to, well, I got through it because of my love for my kids. And I think that love that I kind of mentioned, it's just so surprising and also so miraculous on what it can lead you to do in your life, taking care of your kids. And now that Annie Ray is here, oh my gosh, that moment where I delivered her in the hospital, like I literally felt like I was in a dream. I kept yelling to the nurse and the doctor and my husband. I was like, "Is this real?" I'm like, tell me if this isn't real. Is this real? Because I feel like I'm in someone else's movie. Is this real? And now I'm grateful that I get to experience this love, you know, it, again.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's really cool and has been really unexpected.
Yeah, it's such a, I mean, such a wild experience. And I mean, your pregnancy also wasn't like the easiest pregnancy.
No, yeah, my pregnancy was really hard. I mean, I was on daily antibiotics. I had a high risk OB and a maternal medicine doctor, which basically means I was going in for ultrasounds almost twice a week throughout my whole pregnancy. And
Wow.
I had to get weekly urine tests done to make sure the infection was like, what happens is strep B, strep B that you're tested for at the end of
Yeah.
your pregnancy. And it's like totally normal if you have it. They just put you on antibiotics if you deliver in the hospital so it doesn't pass to baby. Well, from the time my pregnancy starts, we found out that strep B overtakes my whole body, and which is not good. And so then
Yeah.
it creates these bladder infections that are silent. And so you don't know it until it was too late the first time. And um, so we were just constantly checking, constantly wondering, am I going to be okay today? Like, is this the day that I'm not going to be okay?
So
And what's the
stressful.
plan? Every day was so stressful, but we made it. and, and that feels like a feat in itself that I could make it through that pregnancy, but also being pregnant again after a miscarriage, it's a lot. And I don't really think we talk about it a lot because
Hmm.
it's hard to talk about. But I now get a lot of questions from women who are pregnant again after loss, and they're like, is it normal for me to feel this way? I'm waking up in the middle of the night just absolutely terrified, or have anxiety all the time. And what we know is that it's been shown that women who are pregnant again after loss have such a higher risk of postpartum depression, have higher risk of depression and anxiety during pregnancy, and it is normal. Um, and there are things that you can do to support yourself. And something that I really had to focus on during my pregnancy was to be able to separate the two things and create kind of like daily mantras for myself, like that was then and
Hmm.
this is now. My body is my oldest ally. It is safe for me to be pregnant. Like those were the thoughts every single day that I would have to speak out loud. They're still on my mirror. They're put them on my mirror, in my car, on my computer for work, because constantly I was having to remind myself that this was a new experience and it was okay for me to be pregnant again.
I mean, I think like what you said about, not talking about it enough, it's really true. And I think that you're obviously such an incredible resource of being really open about that entire experience and the anxieties that come along with that. Because we talk a lot about pregnancy and pregnancy after loss and miscarriage and, and feeling those feelings, which for everybody, just like pregnancy and also just like postpartum, are so different. Everybody has such different experiences and such different feelings and way to handle things or not handle things. And so being able to have you as such a huge resource in that space for women who experience those anxieties and those stress factors during pregnancy, and then also in the postpartum period of, you know, when is like the next bad thing going to happen. That is, it's such a real thing that that I think is so awesome that you're talking about, because it's making people feel less alone in their journey, which if you know, had a miscarriage and you don't talk about it, or if you're experiencing a pregnancy and are nervous talking about it, you know, after getting pregnant, after a loss, there's so many layers there that I feel like it's so amazing that you're speaking about all that.
Thank you. Well, when we got pregnant with Annie Ray, finally again, I announced it. I think I was like I think I was 10 weeks pregnant. And I got comments from people saying, well, aren't you nervous to announce it early? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have this societal
Yeah.
expectation. 12 weeks, then you're safer. And
Yeah.
it hurts a lot of people. But I remember my response was, well, yeah, I'm nervous sharing, but I would be nervous now, and I would be nervous in 3 weeks or 4 months. And if anything did happen, I now know that I need a community supporting me, because I cannot go through this alone like I did the first time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's the approach and the way that we can support people that are pregnant again after loss. And it's being excited with them. It's allowing them a safe space to share their concerns. It's supporting them no matter when they choose to share their pregnancy. And kind of some of these older rules that society has established is not serving anybody. It never has, and it definitely isn't now, because I think it just makes women more afraid to talk about the things that they're needing support with in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and also just like even asking for support, that's such like a, you know, for a lot of people, that's such a challenging thing to even do. And then you know, put grief along with it, which is, you know, such a big subject in itself as well. So I just think that's also amazing that you're providing such tools and resources for women to be going through that and to not feel alone in that journey. I also think that like having gone having you say that you experienced that during COVID, which is already so isolating and lonely for so many, is also, you know, being able to lean heavily on the community online was probably a big deal for you.
Yeah, it was, because after I was released from the hospital, I mean, my family, I remember they were, I was on the ground floor, so my family couldn't come in and see me. I was in there for a little over a week. And they would bring signs to my window, like knocking on the window, being like, we love you, Ashley. We're here with you. We named our baby boy Jace. We love you and Jace. And that was the way where I could like physically see people outside of my nurses who were with me every day, which God bless them, because they were truly my angels during that time. Um, and I was like, man, this is the loneliest I have freaking ever felt in my entire life. And I never want to feel this way again. And I know that other women feel this way. And if there's anything I can do to support them so that they don't, which is why then I was like, I feel like online right now, this is how we're able to connect to each other during this pandemic time. And because COVID and everything was so new, even when I was released from the hospital, it was during the time where, you know, everyone was still kind of nervous about like seeing each other. And so I
Yeah.
didn't have that in-person support, and support groups weren't happening, and friends couldn't really come over, and it was a lot. And that's where the gift of social media came in, where I could find connection with people in another way.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think there are obviously people talk about all the negative things of social media, which of course there are some, but being able to shine a light on the positive part of this kind of community that people are able to create and lean on is so awesome. Shifting gears a little bit to happier subjects. I mean, happier and also just like learning, because I think the breastfeeding journey, I was like inundated with questions for you just about breastfeeding.
Okay,
It's
let's
like,
go there, because I was not prepared. I think I was so focused on just getting her here that truly I had put no thought into what happens once she's here. Like, what's postpartum like?
yeah,
So then it was here, and I was like, holy crap, this is nothing like I even knew was possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy. And I always like, I talk to people about this. And I think that this, the whole breastfeeding subject is so crazy because it's like you're pregnant. If you're pregnant for the first time, you're pregnant and you like are focused so much on like making sure you feel okay, what's going to be like to get the baby out, what's that going to be like, and then you don't really focus on like what happens if breastfeeding isn't super easy for you, or like just the whole breastfeeding subject in general. Even if it is easy for you, you could overproduce, you could, you know, it could be painful, you can get sweats, fevers, chill, like there's just like it's a whole other chapter that nobody I feel like really prepares you for. So I love talking about this because it feels like there's still so many of us who have so many questions about, I mean, when you posted today about the debacle that you're in of like, do I stop pumping, do I keep doing this, like it is, there's so many emotions that go into breastfeeding that people talk about it being just like this natural thing that you're going to do after you have a baby. And it's like, it is a natural and beautiful thing to be able to do it, but it's not as natural and easy and beautiful as like we think it's going to be.
Yes.
It's like a full-time job navigating the whole breastfeeding world. But I mean, let's talk about your breastfeeding experience because like you didn't really think about it. You had your daughter.
Yeah. And my only examples that I've had of breastfeeding was my sister, really, like in person, was my sister, her three kids, and then some of my friends where it's just easy. They need to be fed, so they're being fed, and breastfeeding is just this easy thing, and that's how you feed your baby. The first night in the hospital, my daughter screamed all night long. And I was like, something is wrong. And they're like, well, she's just learning how to eat. And I'm like, but this cry, I mean, you're a mom now, right? And you're like, no, I know that this is different. And so the second night in the hospital, that whole her screams were like, I was like, I feel like she's starving. And I was producing colostrum at that point, which also I was like, what is, I don't even know.
What's
I
that?
didn't know this was a thing. Like, why isn't my milk pouring out yet? I'm confused. Um, but we put her on like a nipple and formula right away because I was like, for whatever reason, she's not getting enough to eat. And so that kind of helped. But then over the course of the next 2 weeks, as you know, you go to your baby's first checkups and they
Mhm.
want them to be back up at their birth weight within a couple of weeks. And she was losing weight. And I remember I was so discouraged because all I was doing all day was feeding her. She was crying all the time for food. So I was breastfeeding her literally all day. I felt like I was losing my actual mind because
Yeah.
that's all I was doing. And so to hear that she was losing weight, I was like, what's wrong? How is this possible? So we had a lactation consultant come over, which I didn't even know that was a person who
I know.
existed. Luckily, someone recommended it to me. I was like, okay, lactation consultant, come please help us. And she saw that she thought my daughter had it's called a lip tie, a tongue
Yeah.
tie, and then buccal ties. All that to say is that she had these ties in her mouth that were making it so she couldn't transfer the milk. So by the time we were done with the feeding and she hadn't gotten enough to eat, she'd be so tired because she was burning more calories
Wow.
trying to eat than she was actually getting eating. So we had to go get those lasered off, and then it still wasn't really working. So she's on the bottle, and then she starts pooping blood. And we're like, what is going on? And we realize she has intolerances to some of the things that I'm eating. And then, so then I go on this diet where because of the pediatrician,
Hmm.
said, okay, you need to go off dairy. That didn't work. So then I went off oats and soy
Every.
and nuts
Yeah.
and everything that a human eats. Basically, I had to stop eating. And it still wasn't working. And so after I think she was 4 months at that point, and they're like, we have to put you on a prescription formula, which there was a formula shortage, and the
Right.
formula she needed like was so hard to get. So it was all of these things that I didn't know were possible to try to feed her what she needs to be healthy. And I was like, this is so overwhelming. I feel like I just am gonna crawl away into a hole because I don't even know what to do. So that's kind of how it all started.
So she's having this prescription formula and you're still pumping, but she's not having your milk.
Yeah, so now they needed her to be, they needed her gut to heal. So after trying to breastfeed her and give her my milk for a couple months and having the blood still not be cleared from her stool, her pediatrician was like, I really wanted to give you every possibility to exhaust before we have to take this. And she told me, she's like, I'm a mom, so I'm going to say this with a straight face, and I know that it's so hard to hear, but you need to stop breastfeeding. And I just lost it in the office. And she's like, if you want to keep pumping, you can, but for now, we need her gut to heal for at least 2 months, because otherwise it's going to, when we introduce solids, and the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be for her. And obviously at the end of the day, I want her to be fed and happy and healthy. And so I said, okay. So we put her on this prescription formula, and the 2 months of her being on the prescription formula just hit 2 weeks ago. But now the pediatrician is like, but she also needs to eat solids.
Solids, yeah.
And you can't introduce both at the same time in case she reacts to your breast milk again. So we just gave her the breast milk for the first time again today. And so we're slowly going to see if we can reintroduce that. I've added food back into my diet every 2 weeks. So we're like starting when I was off of everything, and then we'll add in when I added oats back in, and then hopefully get to a point where I can breastfeed her again. But I don't know if that's going to happen. And it's been so hard pumping every day without knowing if she's actually going to be able to have it. It's like been this mental load that's been really hard for me to carry, but that's where we're at right now, which is probably what you saw in my Instagram stories this morning. Cause I was like, how do you know, like, how do you make the decision that it's time to stop? Because I feel like, especially as moms, we self-sacrifice a lot for our kids. Like, that's part of motherhood, right? But I'm like, at what point, to my own detriment, do I keep doing this and not even know if she's ever going to be able to have it? So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a, I think there's obviously so much talk, which I think is so great, that just fed is best, that, you know, everybody, we've grown up for so long with breastfeeding is the best thing for your baby, but you know, that's not necessarily the easiest thing for so many people. And also a lot of people can't even do that. So there is so much, I've seen it with, you know, a lot of my close friends as well, that if it doesn't go the way that they had thought that it would go, that there is so many emotions that come along with that. You beat yourself up, like you aren't able to provide for your child. There's the stress factor that so many people experience, including yourself, of formula shortages and like how to even feed your child, which is such a huge stress factor. And then on top of it, trying to figure out and navigate why certain things might not be working the way that you had thought that they were going to work. And then now in this, you know, part of, or this phase of your breastfeeding journey, which is like, you know, what's the next step for you and how to also balance that? Because I remember when I was weaning my older daughter, who's now 2, and I was weaning her off of breastfeeding, I was also not aware of like the emotional part of weaning breastfeeding, because you're doing it for, I mean, you've been doing it for 7 months. I was doing it for a really long time too. And it was just like, then all of a sudden, like, I personally felt like, okay, so if I'm not breastfeeding her, then like, of course I know she's my daughter and I'm connected to her, but like, what is my like feeding purpose for her? Like, it felt almost like it was like I was losing this just connection that I only had with her. And so it was just like such an emotional experience to wean her off. And then of course, like the last time when I was like officially done breastfeeding her, having like that, I was just like, it's done. It's like, it's such a challenging thing to decide. And then of course, when you have space from it, you're like, that was a good time to end it. And, you know, your child's like, thank God, healthy and fed. But people don't really talk about like the challenge to decide when to end, or, you know, like the emotions that go into that.
Yeah, it's so emotional. I was not expecting it at all. And I keep thinking to myself, like, what would I tell my best friend if she was having this, you know, same experience and just needed support? And I would not think any of the negative thoughts about her as I think about myself. Like,
100%,
why are
yeah.
we so hard on ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, part of it is just wanting to have some type of control over this breastfeeding experience that we didn't get to have together, that I was wanting to so badly. I don't know if we'll have more kids in the future, at least biologically. Like, I don't know. And so from in my mind, I was like, okay, this was my one time to have this breastfeeding experience with her, and I didn't get it, and I want it so bad. And what if I end too early, or but what if I keep going for too long and it doesn't work? Like, what's the answer? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes we're just so hard on ourselves, and we're all just doing a really good job. And at the end of the day, I know that this moment in my relationship with Annie Ray is such a small moment of the rest of our lives together. And so I keep trying to just put less pressure on myself, because no matter the decision, she's going to be happy and fed, and our bond is going to be amazing either way. And so it's like replacing those negative things that I think about me, that I tell myself, to know that they're not true, and it's okay whatever I end up deciding.
Yeah. I love that you're also talking about like how hard we are on ourselves versus like what we would be telling our girlfriend or our
Yeah.
sister, or, you know, it's such an important thing to always like have that check of yourself, and also what you're thinking of yourself, like to check yourself, you know, like with your thoughts and with your criticisms of yourself and your, you know, whatever the thoughts are, that you're also like, would I think that, or would I say that? Would that come out of my mouth to my
No,
sister,
I
my
wouldn't
best
even
friend?
think that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, it's such a great thing that you said, to just be able to have that as like a tool when you're feeling like, you know, down about your experience or your journey, or, you know, things not going the way that you thought that they would go, that you're able to have that, like that tool to really bring yourself back and replace those negative thoughts. It's such a, because it's so true. I think like as moms, the criticism it can be never ending, of like what to do better, how to be better. This wasn't good enough. And so being able to have that, and also just being so open like you are. I mean, I again, like my daughter's a month younger than you, so I'm interested just like about your whole process and how that's going to go. I'm like, I'm going to be following along very carefully here. Because it's like it's such a real thing, because I think also like you think like, okay, 6 months I'm gonna do it, like you're gonna do it for 6 months, and then like 6 months is here, and you're like, do I, what,
Yes.
so now what, you know? And then the solids come in, and it's motherhood is just, it's just mother.
I know. I kept telling myself, okay, at 6 months I'll reevaluate. And then we passed it. I'm like, okay, at the end of the year we'll reevaluate. And now the end of the year is coming. And we're like, I think that when you're given, you know, kind of this crossroads, no matter what it is, at least in my experience in motherhood, it's kind of hard. It's hard to let go of those moments in motherhood that you waited so long
Hmm.
for. But also there's so much good also coming, that like it's just the natural progression, I think. But it can
Yeah.
be really hard to, like, my baby's growing up and it wasn't how I pictured it to be, but that's also okay.
Yeah. I mean, just them growing in general is also so emotional.
It's so emotional. I'm like, how are you this old already?
I know. I know. It's wild. Well, I'm so grateful that you shared so much of your whole parenting journey and your motherhood journey and your breastfeeding journey. And I know that I myself am going to continue to follow along just about everything, because you're a month ahead of me. So I'll be learning everything
Love
as
that they're
you,
so close. Well, I've
yeah.
been looking at your stuff like, okay, what is she breastfeeding for solids. How do I do this?
I know it's like it's so crazy. I mean I'll have to like message you on the side about the whole solids thing because it's like
Hey, please do.
yeah, it's such a it's interesting to do it again. Like now this is my second time doing it, so to do it I feel like a little bit less stressed, but it is still such a I mean the whole solids world. It's like and then you have moments where you also are like our parents just fed us like the craziest things that like we're alive and we're okay. So it's not so stressful. So and there's that part of it. But thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today. And I love watching your motherhood journey. And again, I'm so grateful that you're such a light in this whole space of everything that you talk about and have offered such amazing resources to so many women and families who might have experienced something similar to you and are also on this parenting journey with you right now. And it's such a huge gift to people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.